All right.
Oh, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Reels and Heels. And look who decided to join us. Welcome back.
Vacation in the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah. So today's topic is going to be horror. We're joined by two very special guests, which we'll introduce in just after our intro here. So we'll be right back. Oh man, see that music I love that music.
Catchy.
It is very catchy. So as I said, today is all about horror, and our special guest joining us is author Amy Hale and Jeff Carroll, which is a filmmaker as well as an author. So we'll start with you, Amy. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff do you write?
I started out writing thinking I was just going to write romance because that was mostly what I read. And then as I kind of progressed in my writing, I started getting a little darker and darker and realized that I really liked the paranormal, the creepy. And so I've kind of progressed into mostly writing paranormal. It still has some romance elements, but it's definitely got the dark elements too. And I'm working on my first thriller, so I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. Can't wait to hear more about that one. And Jeff Carroll, how you doing?
Very good. Very good. Loving life.
Loving life.
Quarantine.
Yeah. So what kind of stuff have you been doing in the quarantine?
Well, I finished the second edition of my horror comic series called Horror Streets. And I finished 2 horror movies right before the quarantine and was able to finish post-production online and during the quarantine. So that's that. And I have a children's horror comic book that I'm having illustrated now. Actually, 2 of them that I hope to have finished next month and start another campaign for that. And that's a continuation of my Gargoyle story, my Gargoyle comic book, or gargoyle novel character, and that's called Fingernails.
That sounds
creepy.
Yeah, sounds creepy. So today's topic is horror across TV and film, which I'm a fan of pretty much everything horror. Not so much the torture porn type of stuff. Like, I mean, the original Saw was all right, but yeah, I mean, it's not really for me.
There's a handful of hours I can't get back from the movies you made me watch.
So, when did you guys first get introduced to horror? We'll start with you, Amy.
I started reading Stephen King in high school, and it really pulled me in. My dad is also a big fan of the really old cheesy horror movies. So as a kid, we watched those all the time, and we loved sitting there and pointing out the rubber masks and the strings and all the stuff that you can see that you're not supposed to see. But we had so much fun. We loved it, and so my dad, I think, probably really got me into it. And then, like I said, as I was older and I started really getting into reading, I loved Stephen King. I think mostly Stephen King is pretty much all I read. Every time I could get my hands on a book, because his books are huge, so it took me a little while reading in the evenings and after school, and then of course, as reading the books, I started getting into watching more movies and going to movies with friends. And I remember, I think I was 12 when the original Nightmare on Elm Street came out. And I went to the theater and I don't think I slept for 2 weeks. So
Oh man, what about you, Jeff? When did you get into horror?
I don't know. I'll say probably always. Ever since I was little, I remember. But to me, like horror was sort of scary, but some of the most scariest horror, I actually laughed when I saw it. Um, and it scared me later because I did have a lot of nightmares, and I was, an only child, so I was in the room by myself. But I remember watching The Bride of Frankenstein boiling in that tub of water. When she came out, I'm watching this in the Bronx at my friend's cousin's house. We're the youngest kids there. We're from the suburbs. Everybody else is these tough inner city kids, and they're older than us, and they're watching this, and they were laughing because it's nothing to gunfire and drugs on the streets. So we're from the suburbs. So I remember toughing it up, meaning I was scared, but I didn't give in to anybody else. And she came out and she screamed. That was her first words was "Ah!" And she had the head with the white hair going back. I remember laughing my ass off. Oh my God. I thought it was so funny. But I did recognize it was horror. However, I'm going to say it didn't really scare me. I don't think I was scared in the theaters until maybe Halloween 2. That kind of scared me. And then, of course, Nightmare on Elm Street scared me. And that was back when those were scary movies. And then the cheesiness was the afterthought. But they did scare you up front. And then you were like, oh, God, the cheesy blood or whatever it was, that came after. But the setups were always scary. So, yes.
Yeah. Going around to different horror message boards and, groups and stuff like that, Nightmare on Elm Street comes up a lot. That original 1984 film, really, a lot of people got scared on that movie. I know you were one of them.
Well, considering I was 4 when it came out.
Go on.
I saw it. See, there's a lot of movies that I saw when I was entirely too young to see them. So, Jaws and Nightmare on Elm Street, and I don't think I ever saw all of Nightmare on Elm Street ever. Like, I think I saw pieces of it, but then there were times when I'd wake up. I was a terrible sleeper, so I'd go out on the couch with my dad, who fell asleep on the couch, and he'd have the TV on, and before it was off the air, there'd be some weird movie on that was some, crazy horror movie. And I remember seeing Ghoulies and thought I was going to die. I never wanted to go to the bathroom again. And there were just so many things. Like, I was a big chicken when I was a kid. So I kind of took solace in the fact that, like, I liked the monsters. I liked Swamp Thing. I liked vampires, and I liked werewolves because those were far removed from the stuff that could be in my house. And then I got into all kinds of weird paranormal things. So, now I've gone to the dark side, I think.
So is there a horror subject that you guys want to talk about first? Amy seems to be really into the paranormal.
Not really. I just kind of, whatever you guys want to talk about.
No, Amy, I had when he mentioned that, it made me think of how some things in film don't fully translate to books the same. I know I always joke that you're not going to read a comedy book. Like Coming to America is funny as on film, but it's very difficult to write a full comedy in a book. And when I think of some of my favorite horror scenes, specifically from the Jason and the Freddy's, is Jason vs. Freddy, right? Mm-hmm. Jason dragged Freddy to that house, that burning house, or him hitting him with the poles and Jason getting stabbed. I don't know how you can write that in a book for people to enjoy the same way as we enjoy it in film, because usually in book, it usually becomes paranormal and you just get into the mythology of it and it becomes some soft romance, right? Or it becomes dark horror and you go deep with the mythology and you spook people out of religion, as opposed to being some gore porn or just some comedy gore. So how do you see those? I don't even know if I'm asking a question, if I'm making a comment, but how do you see that translating into book, or is that the reason why we don't see that many Freddy books?
I don't know. I do think it's definitely difficult to get that across in the way that it does with film, because you're definitely having to rely on the reader's imagination and whether or not you're bringing out what you're trying to bring out, and hoping that they're catching the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that writes horror named Jay Bauer. Very, very, very good. He has me beta read his stuff, and I squirm every time I read it because it's just icky.
Right.
But it does tend to give me, the way he writes it, it does tend to kind of give me that same kind of, like when I'm watching a movie, and I don't like seeing skin cut. That's one of those where I kind of, tell me when it's over. So when I'm reading his stuff, I find myself, I can't hide my eyes from that, because I'm having to read as they're talking about it. And I don't know, it's so, the mediums are so different that it's, I think it just depends on what you prefer, I guess. But I do agree that it's much more difficult to get that across without going really super dark. Or like you said, it's not quite the same. It's a little more light, like you said, paranormal type stuff. So yeah, I agree that it's a difficult thing to do.
When we think about books, though, when we think about like the translation between the two, it's a lot of what the character brings to it. Mm-hmm. So like the words are there, and that's based on the author and their connotation and denotation and the way they use words and their craft. But then whatever the actor brings to something on film is kind of, plus the way that it's shot and the music that's added and all of these other things, really give you a little bit more of a different kind of thrill to it. Like I did not think Freddy Krueger was funny until I was like 30. And I think it's because I didn't have enough experience, but then I could understand the jokes and the delivery. Mm-hmm. Like there's a certain way that Robert Englund delivers the line. It's like that. It's like, it's not entirely meant to be funny, but the way he delivers it is funny. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe that's the thing, is like what we see is so much of what we can gather is funny. Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like comedy is more,
it has all the senses. When you see it, you hear it. It also lets your imagination work, where on the page it's just your imagination you're relying on. So like you said, the music, the connotation, all of that adds to it.
Yeah, the atmosphere of a horror film is different than reading it.
Right.
And like she says, she's a fan of Stephen King, and like a lot of his films still kind of have that atmosphere of the books. Like it's just creepy.
The ones that he endorses, anyways.
Yeah.
But I think that's Stephen King. Like, for instance, Nicole, you mentioned one of the scariest movies that I ever saw was Jaws, right? And I didn't know that was a book until like years later. I mean, years ago, not even years later, like 20 years ago, that I realized that it was actually a book. And I don't think Jaws is the same story in a book that it is in the movie. For what you said, Brian, that it doesn't have it doesn't have the music. And the music was so much that if you go like this in the movie theater or when you're watching it on TV, it loses that effect. You don't even know when to be scared. And as a writer, I know when I'm writing, I feel like I'm translating my visual images to writing for people that don't see what's in my head. And when I'm watching Jaws, I'm like, how do you write that? Doom, 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 doom. You almost have to just change the way you would describe the scene.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and once you change the way you describe the scene, that's when you end up with, what they're doing now with film. The Kevin James cut of Justice League, because now you're changing the cut of the story. Because it becomes a different story. You've cut it differently. Now I have to tell it from the perspective of the shark, maybe to convey that the shark sees them and what the shark might see. I don't say that because I'm joking, but now I might have to go read Jaws just to see how he did it.
Well, the book is a lot different. Like there was
a whole thing about the screenplay and how it would translate into everything, and then what Peter Benchley said, and it's on the 45th anniversary or whatever it is of the movie that we just got, because that's what Brian's life is, buying new things of the same movie that we've had, but that's re-released 42 different times, so we have like every copy of it. Sorry, I digress, but so we watched the documentary or whatever is like kind of the story behind the story. It was really interesting. So, when we think about what they had to do to make Peter Benchley's story translate on film, you see how much was taken away. And I think, I'm sorry, but I will always believe that in certain cases, the book was better. Only because there's a lot of story that can't be told in a 2.5 hour time frame. Yeah. We rely a lot on books being 600 pages long because there's a lot of story that has to be told in the words. There's a lot of story that has to be told on film in 2.5 hours, which if you can figure out how to fine tune it and make sure you can tell it in pictures, that's one thing. That's why like the comic medium is so hard to write for me, because I've written prose my entire life. And so trying to tell everybody what's up here, it's like, damn it, I wish I could just draw it myself, because it'd just be so much easier. But to translate it on film and have all of these people being part of it is really difficult. If I'm one person like Edgar Allan Poe or Peter Benchley or Stephen King, I got it up here and I can use my words to tell what I wanted to say.
Yeah, or you could be like Stephen King and just have like a line of Coke or whatever, because he's said that he doesn't remember. I'm trying to remember which book it was. One of the books he doesn't even remember finishing.
Which could be why a lot of them kind of have the same tropes throughout. Like I think that a lot of Stephen King's, I don't want to say repetitive, like it's a universe he built of his own. Like it's his own Darius, his own creation, but it's also
he got his own Lovecraftian world.
But you get to a point where you can't retell stories and come up with something new without kind of rehashing something that's already been spoken about. So
yeah.
Although I did like Dr. Sleep, so I might be the only person in the minority.
When they were thinking of, I don't know what it was, the second or the third remake of Carrie or whatever it is. I can't remember if they did 2 of them or something.
Rage.
Or the sequel, whatever. I decided to, read Carrie, right? Unlike Amy and probably you, Nicole, I wasn't a big reader in high school, right? I didn't start really reading until late 20s. I dabbled in it, but I was a nonfiction reader for most of the time, history books and stuff like that. So I read Carrie again, and I liked the way it was written as transcripts, and it wasn't in prose all the time. It broke from it. However, one of the things that I joke about with comic books, especially with the Marvel universe and all these, I was like, you get the liberty to not be so realistic in comic books. And in books, unless you're Janet Ivanovich, you can break silliness and do some silly stuff. But Stephen King does it in books. He does it so much in books that his movies can't be as silly as his books are. And Carrie is like a good example of that, because if they'd have put the ending from the book in the movie, people would have been like, no, we don't lost faith in it, and it was like, the whole story was just a big dream, something like that. And I think about that, but I don't know. I'm reading now comic books, and Tales of the Crypt is a comic series that I'm reading a lot of now, and I thought things were hard to do in different mediums, but looking at certain translations, like movies translate more to short stories than they do a full novel. And it's easier to think of it that way than actually thinking, oh, how do I write this, this novel into a movie? Well, you're not, because, the novel is a series at best.
Right.
And the 3 arc of the movie is not useful in a book, because you can't go, 1 act, 2 act, 3 in a book. Ups and downs in every chapter. You know what I'm saying? People need that in every chapter. So you have to reformat the story.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Me too.
So I know as a teacher, you had issues with the Twilight books and the movies.
For what they're worth, like, she's writing to a certain audience, so you can't expect, you just have to deal with what you expect. But I think that there are certain things that I think we dumb down a lot of things for kids, and I think it's unfair, because there were so many authors that I read as just young adult horror or young adult paranormal or young adult anything, that it worked really well. Like, I loved R.L. Stine, and I loved L.J. Smith, and I loved, stories like that there was a romantic element, because I don't think you can be a teenager without that being part of your life. But, there was that we'll solve the problem kind of thing. Like, that's what I love the most. And so people talked about, Vampire Diaries was just a ripoff of Twilight. I'm like, no, it wasn't, because it was alive much, much longer before, Twilight ever existed.
Yep.
And L.J. Smith was one of my, I read everything she wrote. And part of that is because it was so easy to dive into the horror, because it was happening to somebody my age. And at the time I was reading them, it was fun. And as I go back and reread them, it's even now, it's easy to read them, because it wasn't just this hokey nonsense about being a kid. It wasn't stupid. It wasn't trivial. Like, I kind of felt like there were certain things in the book in Twilight that were trivial, and it made it seem like kids were dumber than we ever give any of them credit for. And I don't think that's fair. The fun thing about Goosebumps is that they were fun, and they were gauged exactly towards the readers who were reading them. And, even all of us can enjoy Goosebumps, even with our kids. Like, I will read them with my son when he's ready, and, it was fun. And so when we got older and we started reading Stephen King and we started reading other things, we were like, oh my God, some of his stuff is really dark and scary. And then you'd watch movies and be like, okay, well, that's not so bad. Like, there was a little bit of like something that could be portrayed on screen. Like, I liked the Vampire Diaries CW show. I liked the Secret Circle CW show. Like, I liked them because it didn't trivialize anything. Like, it was horror for every age group. Like it was life. That's why I like Sabrina too. Although it's a little extra.
I
don't know if that was even on topic, but sorry.
How my opinion bounces off of yours or not, I don't know if I disagree. Maybe I have a different perspective on it. Like, for me, I do see there's some silliness in Twilight. no doubt, but I see the same silliness in 50 Shades of Grey, right?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so for me, I see Judy Blume, right? And I see intelligent exploration of sexual feelings and emotions. But when I taught middle school, I saw Judy Blume students and I saw 50 Shades of Grey students. And I saw 50 Shades of Grey parents and I saw Judy Blume parents. So, to say that, age is monolithic on maturity, is that the way to say it? Yeah. To say that everybody is all on the same maturity at every age is ridiculous. And I just think the problem is when these stories they're so successful that it just casts a certain light on the whole generation. And that, I think, is what is offensive, is that, now we're dealing with the Twilight generation. No, we're not dealing with the Twilight generation. We're dealing with a group of Twilight people in this generation. And that might not be exclusive to this generation because there's a lot of people that connected to it. However, I think maybe because it was kind of the first story of its kind for young people to be that sexually shallow is a better way to say it. Maybe sexually shallow, because Vampire Slayer, I know that was in television first and then came to books and comics, but I think of that and it may seem like it's more mature, but probably to a more mature person that is still Twilight, So I don't know, but it's interesting because I liked Buffy. I got into Buffy, and I'm imploring a little bit of my Buffy energy and trying not to go full Twilight with my fingernails, but I want my character to be maturing, right? So I don't want her to be a grown up in a child's body, because even though I know there were children that were exposed to too much at their age, I didn't like that. I like children to still have innocence, right? And to still learn things. I don't want them to have them with parents that just show them everything. Here, have a beer. Oh, it's just kissing your mother. Whoa. I want them to learn a little bit of that on their own. So I'm nostalgic about my childhood, even though I know there were children that were fast even before I was born.
I think that you kind of agree with me, I think in some places, but I think, and I agree with you there too. It's like, I think our kids need to be right where they should be. Like R.L. Stine is very much geared for kids, probably before the age of 12. And then 12 and 14, we start getting more, I don't know, like we see the characters kind of grow up with the kids. And like case in point, Harry Potter, like you can't be 10 reading the last Harry Potter book. I think that you had to kind of grow up with the characters. And I kind of think that we had to grow up with the characters too in other movies as well. Like Buffy the Vampire Slayer was essentially a movie with Christy Swanson first, and then it became the TV show by Joss Whedon. And I think that even though that was smart and it was funny and there were great moments in all kinds of in all forms of the genres, there were people that probably didn't quite get it and didn't feel as much love for it as everything. And that's why we have fandoms, I think. Like we gravitate toward a story that we love, and that's kind of where we stick.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting how he brought up the Buffy comics, and then like earlier he was asking about like slasher type comics. A good one that I thought they got it right was the Freddy versus Jason versus Ash, because for so long people wanted Ash to be in a Freddy versus Jason movie, and there was talks of the sequel actually having him in, and it would take place during the winter, but it fell through. But those are, I think, comics that actually got the atmosphere right. And the Buffy comics totally got the TV series. I haven't read all of the Buffy comics, but what I did read was just like the show.
And I think that Supernatural is kind of like that too. It started out as a TV show, and then there's this like entire like origin stories in the comics. And I think there's lots of other. Angel was the same way. Lots of other entities that kind of became a whirlwind because people couldn't get enough. Like there was more story to be told, and so we were excited about it.
I'm a huge Supernatural fan. If you can't see all the memorabilia behind me back there, it's one of my favorite shows. So I am totally into that one. There's just so much about it that's just amazing.
Well, and I like stories that tell bigger things. Like I love the horror elements that are always involved in things, but I love it when it tells about life.
Yeah.
So like for me, reading L.J. Smith was kind of the same thing because the horror elements ran through the novel of somebody's life story. And so Supernatural really is about these two brothers and keeping family together. And you know, sometimes it's about the family you don't choose. They just kind of become part of it. And that's the travel, you know, through our journey in life. And it's bigger than just the horror elements that happen. But a lot of those things that happen is what tears us apart. And they're all kind of metaphorical for all the things that, you know, can get into our relationships and our psyches and things that drive us apart and drive us crazy. And so like the weaving of supernatural stuff inside of that is important to me. Like I enjoyed The Walking Dead until I had a kid. Same time Judith was born, and then I kind of couldn't watch it anymore. And that was with me. Like I couldn't have a child and watch a newborn being born into this world of her mother dies in childbirth and now they got to kill her. I couldn't do it. Like for me as a sensitive viewer, I guess, like can watch somebody get hacked to death by Jason, but I can't watch. I don't know. Anyways, I just couldn't watch it. And so it was really hard for me to go back to it now too. But it was smart. It was smart horror. Like, I don't know. Like I like the things that tell the story. I like the stuff that makes you think. It's like, oh, well.
That's something I like about Walking Dead too, is it's not just about the zombies. It's about the human condition.
Yeah.
And how people react when these things go crazy. And you notice that with Supernatural too, is you know, how Sam and Dean deal with things and then how everyone else deals with it because they were raised in this crazy lifestyle. No one else knows this stuff even exists. So you have that mix of what for us to be real world and what's for the, you know, reality for them. And but I love seeing how people react in these stories as well, because like you said, it's not just about the monsters, it's about family. It's about there's some humor, there's some tear-jerking moments. There's a little bit of I don't know if it's romance, but there's always, you know, some Dean getting down with somebody at some point. You know, there's just so much in one story. And I think it's why it's one of my favorites, is because no matter what I'm in the mood for, I can probably find it in an episode of Supernatural.
You know,
you can go from laughing your ass off to crying.
Yes,
for exactly. Ridiculous reason.
And then being grossed out. So yeah.
It reminds me of Dukes of Hazzard supernatural stories, you know, where they're battling with alpha maleism, right? In this pursuit of supernatural paranormal hunting. You know, my wife loves Supernatural, and I like it, but I don't love it, right? And now, when I get up in the morning before Supernatural is Charmed, right? And I remember enjoying Buffy, and Charmed just can't get into it the way I got into Buffy, you know, to watch and care about the characters from next episode to the next episode. And that's sort of how I feel about Supernatural, is I can do it a little bit more, but the one that I really liked was Sleepy Hollow, you know. I really enjoyed that. That again was something similar, and I think the problem I guess the problem or the difference between Supernatural and say Sleepy Hollow was Sleepy Hollow was this building story arc that would have taken them nowhere. You know what I'm saying? And it would have tapped out eventually. Whereas Supernatural is more episodic. So it goes over and over and over. And you can, maybe they have one a two-parter, but it's, endless and go on forever. And I wish they would have employed a little bit of that in Sleepy Hollow, but we're on this like season binging, thing. I don't know whether it's Netflix that did it or Lost, where everything has to be interconnected to the previous episode, and they give you this flashback, previously. I'm like, oh my God, because then I know you enjoy it, but then it's going to tap out. I just watched The Warrior Nun, and The Warrior Nun was really cool, but it tapped out. So now we got to wait on season 2. And then the other ones that die, like I liked iZombie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I liked iZombie. As much as I like it, I don't think I've seen 10 episodes.
Yeah, I think I quit after season 2.
Right. So there needs to be a little glue to get me to watch the next episode. But to me, I actually like iZombie when I remember it more than I liked Supernatural. But for some reason, the way Supernatural is written, I don't feel guilty if I miss one, because I know I can always go back and catch up. And it's like The Walking Dead. I was so mad that they didn't kill Negan. I was like, all right.
Me too.
I was like, this is annoying because it's like you said, Amy, I want to see how people behave, but at some point, I don't want to be in a movie where everybody trips when they're running from Jason. And Walking Dead started like it was a bunch of unrealistic characters that were not standing up to this guy. Now, mind you, they just went through the governor. Okay, so they had their manhood check. At some point, I'm not scared of death anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm at least imagine I wouldn't be. So to me it became annoying. Even though I keep saying, "Oh, go back in and watch it again." Now I done missed a whole season, so I might not even know what's happening.
Yeah, I'm several seasons behind because once they started bringing Negan in, I realized that Negan wasn't going anywhere. He just kept annoying me, and I just kept. I think I just kind of got desensitized to. You get to the point where you're just like, just kill him,
Right?
Just kill him.
Yeah, I'm a few seasons behind on The Walking Dead. I do know that Ryan Hurst plays a very popular character from the books. He's on the show now, and apparently he gets on very popular shows.
I like Ryan Hurst. And I guess part of what I love about Supernatural is that it did move from being episodic to having a larger arc across a season. So like there was always a big bad they were fighting, even though they were fighting these little bads all along the way. And it kind of always brings us back to that, what is actually going to happen? Yeah. I feel like it's given us some foreshadowing on what's going to happen to the brothers, but at the end, we all kind of want there to be a happy ending for them because they've been through so much. And I guess maybe that's a lot of maybe the people that they're writing the show for, like us, as us, we want to see it kind of come to fruition. We want to see that end of all of this where they finally get their happy ending, or, I would like them to get a happy ending, but like you get invested in the characters and you're like, well, they spent time in the cage and they've gone to hell and they've been killed 17 times. And, like I get it, but at the same time, you want to keep coming back for more. And yes, true. I mean, they're beautiful people, so it's hard not to want to watch. But there's so many really, like, for me, just there's a lot of kick-ass, female characters in supporting roles where they are, they might be on the flanks. They might not be the star of the show, but I think that's what makes the show. Like, I almost don't want to watch a show where it's an all-female cast because I want to see somebody that's more, I want us to have our place in the fight. I don't want to see us glorified in any way. Like I want us to be fighting right alongside, and that's how I felt like they portrayed the show. But we're just spending a lot of time talking about Supernatural, which I'm okay with.
I'm gonna throw out to you in another one, right? I've been watching Xena the Warrior Princess, and again, that's all female with a lot of males supporting cast, but I don't mind that. I just feel it, as long as it's genre focused as opposed to it's going to be females or it's going to be males, then it's okay. I can enjoy it. But when you were talking about Supernatural having to have an end, it reminded me of the X-Files, which was episodic, and eventually you knew the characters had to tap out sometime because and they have a life and they want to get on to other things like make movies, even though Scully, she never did, you know what I'm saying? She didn't go on to make as many things, but, they had to bring it to an end. And, they had to come to grips with who this guy was that was telling Mulder in secret, the great man or whoever it was, I can't remember, but they had to bring it to an end. So that might be what they have to do to Supernatural. But it's a very loose story arc, where there's a lot of, everything is an end game, right? We're not getting the Thanos right away. We're going to do a lot of things before we get to Thanos.
Yeah. Well, so Supernatural is going to end either one of two ways. They go out in a blaze of glory, or they get their happy ending. That's how it's going to be.
I'm thinking it's probably going to be Blaze of Glory. Unfortunately,
Lord only knows now because our last season got hijacked by COVID. So
yeah, they're just sitting around waiting to film now. So.
Yeah. And you know what? I wouldn't mind actually them using that song from Young Guns as the end song.
I think probably the other part about it is that we love our horror, like we love certain horror movies and TV because it kind of strikes a chord with us. Like I'm an 80s and 90s baby. Like that pop culture is really important to me. So the music that is being played is music I listened to when I grew up, and it's like it's my childhood on screen. And some of the things they say, and some of the fact that we are relatively the same age, it kind of makes it that much more, realistic to me, I guess. I don't know. Like I hold my pop culture very, very close to my chest, as most 80s and 90s babies do. And so like, that's why a lot of us can't give up the fact that, Kiefer Sutherland will always be a Lost Boy. And seeing him in 24 is just weird. Like,
yeah.
I mean, and I, it's like little things like that we hold it very deep down, like, for most people, Johnny Depp is
Pirates of the Caribbean,
Jack Sparrow, but I never knew, like, I've watched Nightmare on Elm Street now, and he's like, Johnny Depp is Nightmare on Elm Street and Crybaby. Like, he will always 21 Jump Street. So like we hold on to, I think, our pop culture too. And I think that when it appears in our horror stories, I think we kind of love them a little bit more.
Maybe. Yeah.
Until you saw him in the other Sleepy Hollow, when he's or whatever, Johnny Depp, I forgot what the name of the movie was.
Sleepy Hollow. Yeah.
He did good. I mean, I think, what Samuel Jackson does is important for actors to do. We're just talking about film right now, is really change up their look, because if they don't, then it's very hard to separate that. And I think sometimes if they really do one character well, it's hard to see them in other characters, like Lost Boys. I think he did so good in that. It was hard to see him in other characters because I think that just fit him. You know what I'm saying? And was he in Young Guns?
He was.
Yes.
Yeah. So
he was the bully in Stand By Me too, right?
Yeah. Well, he was the older brother. Because he was like 5 years older than
But
Will Wheaton and them.
I think they have to push through it. You know what I'm saying? Because like Keanu Reeves, we've seen him. He's what do you call it? What's the one he killing everybody?
John Wick.
He's John Wick, but he's also Neo. You know what I'm saying? So
And he is from Bill and Ted. Like,
yeah. So
he's super in Point Break.
he does all of those well. You know what I'm saying? And then there's still an element of him where he looks just like Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted. He has that look, where he's, kind of high-ish. You know what I'm saying? In all of his movies, so he still has that iconic Keanu element, but you see him in these different roles. And of course, he's grown. John Wick. He's not Neo from the first Matrix because he's 10, 20 years older. So, it works, but I definitely...
Is he really 10 or 20 years older? I mean,
he's gonna live forever.
Yeah, he probably actually is a vampire at this point.
I think
ages.
There was a good point. There because there was a question up in our feed a little bit ago, and so we were talking about how we have beloved characters that actors go on and be something else, and it's hard for us to deal with. But what about our beloved characters that other actors become them? So like Robert Englund is our first Freddy, but then we also had
Jackie Earle
Haley, and then they're talking about Kevin Bacon being the next incarnation. So how do we feel about the transitions between characters? Like,
I think it depends on the character. Like with like my son is a huge Friday the 13th fan, and there's been 5 Jasons now, something like that. So and I wouldn't even known it if somebody had told me that. I just he's behind a mask or he's got makeup or whatever, so I don't know the difference. I just know that with each movie, thankfully with each movie he got a little more intimidating because the first movie, watching with my son, and we're like, they can outrun him. Why is this a big deal? But he got more intimidating with each movie, and he got a little I don't know if it's stronger, a little faster, whatever, where he really felt like a threat. The first movie, I'm just like, yeah, he's a big guy with a, you're just kind of like, why is this?
Well,
I wonder if it's the introduction of Kane Hodder, though.
Yeah, because that's the fan favorite.
Like, I love Kane Hodder.
That's my favorite too, is Kane Hodder. And
I love the movies that Kane Hodder plays Jason. So, like, I love those more. And so, there is like an element of he is a super scary guy, but I also like have met him and adore the man. Like, I just think he's the most awesome dude ever. But like, it's funny that we see different incarnations of a character,
like Dracula.
Dracula
been played by multiple people.
Those ones. I don't know. I think of it like, and I don't know if the Joker is supposed to be scary per se. And I know this is, talking about horror, but thinking of characters like that, if they rebrand them or they add elements that are different, like they did with Michael. Even Jason had it when Rob Zombie took over. He did them in a different way. I think, and I didn't like it that much, but I liked the gaps that filled in the story. You know what I'm saying? I think there's ways to do it, especially think about all of the different Frankensteins, all of the different Draculas. None of them took away from other Draculas, but, I like, oh my God, the movies are escaping me now, where he's fighting the werewolf and the girl from Underworld is in it. Van Helsing, that Dracula.
Yeah.
I like that Dracula. But then I like the little 3-part Dracula they had on Netflix, where he was buried after time and he pranked the nun. That was really cool. So and then I like Fight Night. You know what I'm saying?
Fight Night.
So I think of all of the different Draculas that Freddy, Jason, And even with throw Leatherface in there, they're going to have to go through. But, I'm pretty sure like our grandparents who probably grew up on a Lugosi type character experienced some of the same things. But then eventually, as the stories around these characters won them over, they started to see this character differently, So we'll see. It's just, you're not writing an original character, so you have to do something else to improve it. You know what I'm saying? The first character is the best one until you can reboot it. And that's a challenge for the writer.
Yeah, I always thought Christopher Lee played a good Dracula in the 70s with the Hammer films. Now, Jeff, I was going to ask you, is there what are your thoughts on like Jordan Peele and how he's taking black horror?
Yeah. I was going to do that, but I was like, dang, because I met Tony Todd, right? And we were talking about people that make characters. Now, I liked Candyman, right? But I didn't love Candyman. You know what I'm saying? And when it came to cosplay, I used to tell people, man, what? I got to dress as Candyman. He was a regular black guy with a winter coat on. I said, Freddie got a burnt face. Jason and Michael got masks. Leatherface got a leather face. Where Candyman is just a regular black guy. That's not scary. You know what I'm saying? Or I want it to be scary. You know what I'm saying? So seeing another person seeing them reboot Candyman, which was always like my go-to joke, because my movie self-promotion, The Death Pledge, is a mass serial killer, right? Because I wanted him to be able to fight Michael. I wanted him to fight Jason. I wanted him to be in that conversation. So I don't know. I mean, I like what Jordan Peele is doing in terms of introducing fear in a diverse way, right? Because what scares people definitely is cultural, as we know it is religious. Like, I was a lot more Christian when I was in high school, and that made Damien Omen and The Exorcist a different type of horror movie for me. But in my late 20s, 30s, I started to look outside of Christianity, and they became different movies to me, and they weren't scary in the same way. And I think that's good. So take, for instance, the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church, which is very more rigid. And me growing up in a Baptist church, right, where there's a lot of singing, there's a lot of spiritual Holy Ghost catching and stuff like that, that's different. I think those things are useful. So take, for instance, Get Out, which was his big picture. I grew up 4 blocks from a white town that had Ku Klux Klan paraphernalia during Halloween, right? And I even experienced the N-word being used in a real derogatory term in a threatening manner. Like, get out of here. No, get that N-word. And I was like, oh, shoot, in that neighborhood. So the Get Out experience was very different for me than it might have been for somebody from that neighborhood. You know what I'm saying? And it was cool because he showed the fear and explained it and still scared you with it. So, like, for me, I'll give you an example. Nicole, you made it very clear. Your example is the best one, right? Jaws. I grew up in a town that had no ocean near it, right? New Jersey, we had to go through New York, and the rivers and the oceans was dirty, and we didn't really go there. Whereas if I grew up on a Caribbean island where I'm surrounded by water, Jaws would have been a different movie. So it was funny for me until I went snorkeling. When I jumped in that ocean and I saw how deep the sea was and how clear it was, I was like, holy moly. I thought of Jaws because it was a comedy. It was a movie. It's like Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project is funny to a person that lives in the city until you go camping, you know?
That really is a good point though, because we talk about everything being from experience. Like if you were a kid like Brian, who doesn't have a problem sleeping at all, but a kid who suffered from night terrors and nightmares, Freddy takes on a whole other meaning. Mm-hmm. And then when you listen to Wes Craven talk about where he got the idea, you're just like, well, I ain't never sleeping again. Like I'm cool. Like I'm good. How many days can you go without sleep?
Because he got the idea from real life news articles.
Well, and there's a whole belief that, I mean, truly, if you die in your dreams, you die in your, if you die in your sleep, if you die in your dreams, you die in real life. Like there's a whole belief and a whole culture that believes in that.
Is that like in the Philippines, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, that takes on a whole nother thing. Like I grew up in Michigan, so we had freshwater lakes. There weren't no sharks. So if somebody talks about a shark to me, I'm like, it's gonna eat me. I'm done. Like I'm out. Like I'm staying on the sand. I'm good.
Well, that's because the B movie people didn't make a lake shark movie yet.
Yeah, there were no sharks and tornadoes and sharks and
the shark movies are immense. Land shark, all that. But you made me think of another movie, and I'm already old and I be forgetting my stuff. But when you were talking about being scared in different places, I remember a lot of movies didn't have to be good to scare me. Like what was it? When Darkness Falls, and that was a movie that was made in the era of, or the emergence of digital horror, right? It, you know, almost like Mama. And I remember watching Mama because she was digitally on the floor. And it was like, oh my God, just step on her. But when I saw When Darkness Falls, and it explored the dark spots in your rooms when you sleep, that, you know, the window light casts that shadow in the corner, and there can be something in that corner. I was like, oh man. And when the mother went to the room and she got beat up, the movie wasn't scary after that, but that part of the movie scared me, and it did very well. It, you know, and that's like, you know, waking up at night.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say, so when I was a kid, like I knew I was gonna be a teacher, and it was important to me to be like with kids, and I was with kids all the time. Like I babysat and I did all kinds of things. So like all I wanted to be was a mom and a teacher. Like that's what I wanted to do. So when I was a kid and I saw People Under the Stairs, it was not a good movie. But that movie scared the bejesus out of me, because I'm like, there could be a parent that actually did that. And the more I know now about CPS and all these things, like I'm like, these kids, things like that happen to kids. And so it made it that much more scary. Plus situational things that happen, like, you know, the night after I watched it, when I was laying in bed, the gerbil got out and chewed on the wall, which, you know, gave it a whole nother meaning. But I mean, I think situationally we come with experiences that make it more scary for us.
Yeah.
Like I don't like anything that's too graphic for no reason. Like gratuitous gore doesn't get me. But we saw Midsummer and I about died. Like, because everything is beautiful except for those very like striking points. When the elderly couple jumps off the cliff and she bounces off the rock. Like, holy mother God, like I jumped and I was like, like what did I just see? Because everything was beautiful up until that point. And then you're like, well, hell, I don't even know what I'm watching now. and then when she's like, he's inside the bear suit and it got real dark real fast, but like everything is so pretty on the outside, and I'm like, oh,
that movie's very bright.
It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it is a beautifully made book, or beautifully made movie. Cinematography wise, is the color is amazing, but then you're like, holy Jesus, like the points when it is scary. Like it's terrifying. It's like people could really do that.
Yeah, that took cult to a whole new level. I mean, I wonder if that's how people were feeling when in what I think it was in the 70s, the original Wicker Man movie came out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
I'm
Burning Man? Wicker Man?
the
Burning Man?
the Wicker Man.
Wicker Man.
Yeah.
Okay. I to get the two best.
Um,
Things burn
and I did see the Nicolas Cage remake, and that was horrible.
Maybe that's why I don't remember. I blocked it completely out of my memory.
You know, there's a whole genre called gore porn, you know, where they focus on the grotesque. I remember when Saw came out, it was the same year as Dawn of the Dead, with Vin Rames, and Mekhi Phifer.
And that was a good movie, Dawn of the Dead.
I liked Dawn of the Dead better because I did not like the gore of Saw. You know, it didn't have the surprise elements. Like when that little girl jumped up at the end of the hallway and ran, I was like, oh, we got different zombies now. It's a game changer. You know, the running zombies was, man, between that and 28 Days Later, it was a total. I used to think, oh, just run, hit him with a hammer, you know, Shaun of the Dead type. There's a little bit of avoidance, soft biting. But when they came out with that fast running zombie, that changed it. But people do get into this gore porn. I remember that's the other thing that the sex porn of like Hellraiser. As scary as Hellraiser was, the sex part of it kind of took away from the fear for me. And I saw it probably as a virgin. I think I was still a virgin at the time, or a new to sex person. I was still very conservative. And the first Hellraiser, that was so much of a part of the movie that it still keeps me from really recommending the movie, talking about it, and enjoying it. As scary as the concept of a pinhead is, I still think of S&M. Because he's out of that. He's out of that culture. That's what he is. So I don't know. I'm as funny as it seems, right? I did enjoy the Rocky Horror Picture Show, right? In a different way, than I felt about Hellraiser. Rocky Horror Picture Show, I'm going to put this out there, and I don't want, please don't give me negative feedback, but I'm just going to put it out there. Hopefully in the context, you'll be able to understand it, right? I do think Rocky Horror Picture Show promoted homophobia. I'm just going to say, because I think you might be scared of being made a transvestite, if that's the thing. If it wasn't a joke, right? If it wasn't silly fun and a musical of sorts with a lot of music and a lot of other things going on, that's really what were you supposed to be scared of? And I think when I saw it, I again was in that virgin stage, you know what I'm saying? And I had a lot of older people that would show me stuff to scare me. That's what you're supposed to do, but sometimes you can scare a person too much and can traumatize them. Not that I'm against it now. I'm thinking of it in a different way, as opposed of what real, because like homophobia now is like anti-gay. That's a different thing. But scared of that can either make love to you and your girlfriend at the same time and take advantage. That concept is what I'm talking about when I talk about that. And that's like kind of what I thought of when I saw that movie, different from maybe how I probably enjoy it now as just a fun experience, and now I see it like in theaters with people reenacting it, and it's all fun because we're not thinking about what's going on in the movie.
But, well, I think that's what horror does in general. Like, there's always a message in horror films.
But I think it does talk a lot about what was happening at the time. Like, we were in the midst of the AIDS epidemic. We were dealing with understanding anything that had to do with that kind of lifestyle. And I think that whenever we talk about it, there's always kind of like that, like, oh, this is really happening. And for most of us, we don't even realize it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all experience. Like, I never knew anybody who was gay. Like I didn't when I was a kid. So watching it, like, I didn't understand what it was when I was a kid, but as an adult, I'm like, well, I wonder if that was part of it. Like it got really big, and then it wasn't that we were afraid of it, but it kind of poked fun at the fact that we were afraid because, you know, you got this, you know, real white bread couple that comes into this holy, like, what is going on? And it blew their mind. And I think that that was kind of what happened to most of us as white bread, our white bread culture, is that there was this whole underlying, you know, subculture that was happening that we didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And that I think we were afraid of it, that we figured out that it was happening. But I think it's the same as what Jordan Peele is doing now. It's like he's talking about racism in a way that kind of brings to light the other side of the story. And, you know, we see it as fearful because we have to come to terms with ourselves. Like, because we really are the evil in that. Like, and the way we feel about it. Even if it wasn't me even if I wasn't part of the mob, even if I wasn't part of whatever was happening, I have to come to terms with what happened and how I'm viewed now. And that's hard for most of us. And so I don't have a problem with when he says, this is how I'm going to cast my movie. It's your movie. Does that mean I can't go and enjoy it and say, wow, you know, he really made me think about what my fears are. And I think that that's kind of what they were trying to do in Rocky Horror Picture Show, even though it became a very campy, very cult classic kind of thing. Like, I think that all horror kind of gives us a push in the direction of thinking about ourselves is kind of the monster.
You know, the funny thing is, like, my second movie, Gold Digger Killer, was originally supposed to be like Foxy Brown, right? And I still wanted to have some elements in there that was scary. But when I wrote it into a book, it became an urban fiction story, you know, like street lit, and it's totally something different. But I remember the movie that I took inspiration from was like Miss 45 and this other movie called Clockwork Orange. And for me, giving you an example, like not being a woman, right? I've been a man my whole life, right? Rape of a female was always like the most scariest scene. You talk about covering my eyes, trying to block it out, go to the bathroom, I'll come back after it's over. It was something that I was morally detested by. And then visually, there was no enjoyment. So it's like when I saw two movies, Tyler Perry, Diary of a Mad Black Woman, the way he showed the rape was close the door, nobody goes in the room, all the audience does is hear it. That was perfect for me. I need to see it, right? And a lot of people, to me, that's like one of the most horrible things. Even though I'm a man, and I mean, of course, a man can get raped too, it just doesn't, you know, it doesn't seem like it. Like they left that part out in Misery. Like Misery, if she raped him, we didn't see it. You know what I'm saying? And I'm pretty sure she might have done that if it was a real story, right? But I also say, like in my other movie that I like, they took out the rape scene and it became a fun movie, and that is Sucker Punch. And I love the fact that they took the rape scene out of that movie, because it would have been a darker horror movie had they left the rape scenes in there. So yeah, I mean, I think sometimes we don't want to see it, and it can still convey like messages, because I'm a guy and I love movies where the woman goes after the guys that raped them. You know, that's, you know, for me, I'm loving it. Go get them, you know, bad guys. You know.
Yeah, like I Spit on Your Grave and Last House on the Left.
Mm-hmm. You know, some of those they show the brutality. You know what I'm saying? Even though they show the brutality, that sets you up for the brutality on the back end. You know what I'm saying? Like, think of Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
That movie wasn't as brutal as the story really was.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God they didn't show us all of the stuff. Now in the sequels, where dude had Hannibal's cut my head open and he's still conscious and he doesn't aware that Hannibal in his own brains. Whoa, that is some gore stuff right there.
I could never watch that movie again.
Yeah.
Too scary, right? Or too gory.
The movie, I think, because what year did it come out? I was still young, was 7. And because it talked about, I mean, I grew up in a fairly loosely Catholic home. So like the 7 deadly sins were talked about, but not a thing. But then everything that came, it was a smart film. Like I love the movie, but the getting to that point was like, it was the first entirely graphic horror movie that I ever saw where everything that you could have imagined was on screen. And so like I'd grown up with movies like, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like you'd see the blood go across the sheet and you don't see anybody bleeding. You just see it like flee across the sheet and you're like, oh, well, you know, stuff's happening. And I was seeing it. I'm just like, I could have lived my entire life without knowing that people could have leather things made and leave rotting corpses and half alive in rooms with air fresheners. Like I just could have lived my whole life without that. But I enjoyed the smart of the movie.
So Jeff, what is your opinion then on like a film like Hostel, where you have these college kids, you know, they go over to Europe and they meet these girls and they think they're going to have sex with them, and then they end up being kidnapped and tortured and put up for like auction and stuff, pretty much.
Maybe you never want to go to Europe.
I'll say this: my mother wanting to go to Europe movie was what is it? American Werewolf in London. that was my never want to go to Europe movie, right? Or the back countryside of Europe. But I don't know. I think for me, I'm a Disney story type person, right? I know I get beat up for that, but I like my stories that have a happy ending. I don't want misery, and like my first goal is to find out how we're going to beat Thanos. How are we going to beat the monster? How are we going to destroy the monster? And I don't mind taking the whole movie to figure that out, as long as at the end we destroy the monster. So for me, I'd rather Taken, right? The Liam Neeson movie is my answer to Hostel. You know, so yeah, we can get into something that we didn't really expect, but let's get them out. You know what I'm saying? Let's not, you know, and you know, like the survivor of what do you call it? Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Wrong Turn, those other, you know, Midwest scary stories. I'm also interested in the survivor of it, because sometimes it feels like, I remember I used to ask people, why do you like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre so much? You know what I'm saying? It's a horrible story. It's a sad story. You know what I'm saying? And then after a while, I got into it and stopped being so scared of the reality of going to Texas, right? And got into the comedy of the movie. And I said, oh yeah, it is funny when he was running right past the people he's trying to kill, you know what I'm saying? With the chainsaw still blazing. That was kind of funny. So I was able to enjoy it in a different way. But the reality of it, like the scariest part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was when you're coming down the stairs with the news camera and the camera goes out. I'm like, oh, it was real.
Yeah.
Oh.
Until there's a motorcycle that backfires in the parking garage of the movie theater that you're trying to get out of.
Oh, yeah. So we're in Vegas and we just get out of the movie, and like the dude starts up a motorcycle and she thought it was a chainsaw. She started running.
I ran. I said, all men for themselves. We getting out of here. I'm out. Like, I'm done. Like, I can't. I just, for whatever reason. And like that experience though is stemmed from other experiences, because they had a haunted trail when I was a kid in my hometown, and the park that they used to have it in had trails all over. I'd been in all of these trails. It was not a new thing. But when it's dark outside and you have somebody chasing you with a chainsaw motor, you don't react the same way. Like, for whatever reason, your brain goes into fight or flight. And so I ran out of the trails, and I tripped over, like, literally every freaking horror movie trope. I tripped over a root in the thing because I'm, full of grace too. But like, I tripped over it and I hit the ground, and I swore to God they were going to come get me. I was sure I was going to die. And so that, whatever that experience triggered in me, he was gone. He was laughing his ass off at me. He thought it was the funniest thing.
As I watched the motorcycle.
He's like, it's a motorcycle, stupid. And I'm like, not stupid. I'd be alive. He's like, I've got the car keys. I'm like, well, then maybe I wouldn't be. But the point of the matter is that those things become ingrained in your head. Like, it becomes part of, like, I don't know why that was so stupid. It was dumb. I know it was dumb. But I was scared. I was genuinely scared.
So
we just bought a new house, and we've got cornfields behind the house.
Oh my God.
I cannot help, now that the corn's gotten tall, every time I look at it, the first thing that pops in my mind is Children of the Corn.
Like, who's living in there?
It's just, and it doesn't scare me, but it's just the first thing that pops to mind. So I just find myself going.
So let's hop into the subject.
Where are the blonde children at? Where are they at?
Let's hop into the paranormal a little bit and talk about some ghost movies. Earlier this year, I introduced you to a gem called The Entity, which is a true story.
Yeah, well.
Have you guys seen that film?
Which one?
The Entity.
I don't think I have.
It's from the early 80s. I want to say it's like
Robert Hershey in it, right?
Yeah. Let me see. I got the thing here.
Like, he's like looking at it. It's on the rack right there. So he's probably looking at it, waiting for his moment.
Yeah, Barbara Hershey's in it.
Barbara Hershey's in it.
Huh. No, I haven't seen that one.
So it's all about, like, well, okay. It's a hardworking single mother who one terrible night is raped in her bedroom by someone or something she can't see. Met with skeptical psychiatrist, she is repeatedly attacked in her car, in the bath, mosquito, and in front of her children. Could this be a case of hysteria, a manifestation of childhood sexual trauma, or something even more horrific? And because there's like literally like there's case studies written about this, and how brutal attacks by paranormal can be. Like, this movie was in a way silly for me, but also kind of scary, because if you've ever experienced anything that was at all paranormal in your entire life, like, margarita glasses flying at people's heads and DVD cases hitting people in the back, like I lived in houses where this happened, and yeah, it could be in my head, but I'm almost sure that it wasn't. Like, that was a scary, it was a scary movie, because you're stuck in this, nobody believes you, and you have to live it.
Yeah, I've had several houses that had some very interesting things happen. And the one that we just moved out of when we bought this house was probably the most active house I'd ever lived in. And it's funny how those kind of movies actually scare me more now than they used to, because I've had some odd experiences. I think my brain goes, maybe that could happen. Where I'm not worried about actually, Jason chasing me or Freddy Krueger. As much as they're scary, they're a fun scary, and then you have to be done like, okay, that's not real. But the stuff that can actually happen, the people that kind of lose it and go after people, and this paranormal stuff that you can't explain but you've seen, that really messes with you. And I was never so happy to move out of my house as we were this last one. Because it was just the closer we got to moving day, the worse it got. To the point that I was just like, all right, I am saying adios. I'm not going to miss this house at all.
My experience with it is I heard about ghosts before I was able to get scared of them. I remember when my grandmother died when I was in college, or one of my grandmothers, and who happened to be the one that spoiled me the most. I remember calling my mother the next day and saying, "Hey, how's grandma?" And I had felt such a good feeling come over me. And she said, "Oh, we didn't want to tell you that your grandmother passed away." And I was like, "Well, it's not that bad because I think I met her last night. You know, when I was sleeping, she came and said something to me." And kind of like after that, I really wasn't scared of ghosts in the same way as them being real, right? I'm no more scared of ghosts. And I'm actually less scared of ghosts than I am of real people because I feel that there's a moment of clarity in death that life doesn't offer. I also say in like my movies that there are good and bad ghosts, right? So just like a ghost can hit you with a CD or slam a door, they can leave the gas on and blow your house up, right? Do that in the middle of the night. So if a ghost really wants to do harm to you, if they know anything about this world, there are a lot more things that they can do than the things that we think they're doing that are bad. Mm-hmm. Said, I really enjoyed Poltergeist.
Poltergeist was great, yeah.
And it really did scare me. Like,
that one is a scary
movie. I think up until, I don't know, I don't think I saw the actual full movie, like the whole movie, until we watched it together. Because I'd seen clips. I'd been terrified of the Man in the Hat. I was a little kid, like seeing little bits and pieces. So like, and because I lived in such active houses up until now, like, I think you don't realize how active things were until you live in a house where you don't have it. And then you're like, oh, this is what it feels like.
Michigan is known to have a lot of activity.
And we've lived in Michigan. I lived in Las Vegas. We've lived in Florida. And there have been places in all three states that have just terrified the bejesus out of me. And for experiences that I had personally, hearing about experiences I had at my grandmother's house, like little things like that it is a very real world if you've ever experienced it. Now, am I still more afraid of the stuff that lurks outside of my house than what could possibly be inside? Yes. Yeah. I'm always more afraid of what is real than what's not. But when you're living it, it is very real. Mm-hmm. And so when you tell people that you've experienced this and they just kind of look at you as, okay, yeah, whatever. And there's similarities that go across things. Like you become kind of hyper aware of what's happening to other people. And you're like, okay, well, that could potentially be something that I did really experience. It wasn't just my brain playing tricks on me. I wasn't just in a state between dream and reality. Like it really did happen.
Yeah.
So as we're talking about ghost films, then what are your thoughts on Paranormal Activity, which made a lot of money and pretty much came out of nowhere?
I've only seen the first one.
Keep it that way.
Yeah, I've only seen the first one, and I found it entertaining. I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, just waiting for things to happen. Some of those minor things that happened in the film, like doors shutting and that kind of stuff, I've seen myself. So I was just like, ooh, Of course, then there's the pulling off sheets and grabbing the legs and all that. I think the first week after watching that, I made sure that my sheets were over on me real good, It's just one of those things that's in your head when you go to bed. And the ending, though. The ending, that ending is what made me just like jump completely out of my skin. because I was not expecting it. But I have not seen any of the other ones. My daughter keeps telling me I need to watch them, but I've just never made the time. So
I think maybe if you're gonna watch any of the sequels, the second one is
directly connected.
Is directly connected, and it's just as good. But the rest of them just are ridiculous. Like, what the hell? Like, you're just trying to make money now.
Yeah.
For me, I studied the Paranormal Activity movies when I made my last movie because I really wanted to get that jittery element there. But to me, Paranormal Activity is like a reality show attempt to like horror movies. And I think they focused on the visuals and that straddled it. It's very successful, so I'm not going to hate on it, right? But I do think like Annabelle and the Nun movies, they got it a little bit better because I think if you're not going to go like they did in Entity, right, where you're going to follow a true story or the Diary of Emily Rose, then you have to go past the Blair Witch Project. And where do you go when you go past the Blair Witch Project? And that is full outline. You know what I'm saying? You got to go Stephen King. Otherwise you're going to become redundant because there's nothing else there. And so when I think of Paranormal Activity, I like Annabelle, I like The Conjuring, and I like The Nun better, where they use the same principles, but they went further with the lie. And the lie, it became much better. And, The Nun is actually, I think, Paranormal Activities, they weren't even considered horror movies the same way as Poltergeist or Amityville Horror was. But The Nun is, and I think that's the beauty of it all. Like Annabelle, even though Annabelle and Conjuring, are same, they still borderline special effects or just gimme movies. But then The Nun actually be like, oh shoot, you're gonna be scared, and like there we are, right back past that digital era to something that actually can be scary and CGI at the same time.
Yeah, we both loved the Conjuring, and I can't wait for the new one.
It scared me. I was like, and The Nun probably scared me worse. I think The Nun scared me worse. Like,
The Nun was really good.
Yeah. But
did you love The Conjuring because of the movie, or was it because of Patrick Wilson?
I plead the fifth on that one.
She loves Patrick Wilson.
I'm with Micah. She's good.
I have read a lot about the Warrens, and when you follow the paranormal, you tend to follow people, and I can understand how some people would say, well, it's just a bunch of hooey, but there's sentiments that can be true. There's little things that I think probably everybody could say, yeah, that probably happened. And when we glorify things in Hollywood, we kind of make them scarier than they are. Like, nobody, unless you're a paranormal buff, unless you really do like to watch, when they go into places and film haunted places and things.
Like all day.
Yeah, yes. I enjoy those shows where they go in and investigate or whatever. I enjoy them, but I also enjoy watching things that talk about the lore of places too. Like, where did that come from? Like the Lizzie Borden house. Like, I can't wait to go. Like, I want to go to the Lizzie Borden house, and I want to go to the axe murderer house. I don't know why. I'm weird like that. But like places like that where you want to feel something that would confirm that
East State Penitentiary. You said you want.
No, I don't want to go there.
You don't want to go there?
I don't want to go there. But like, the Winchester Mansion, like places like that where I've been to the Whaley House. People say all kinds of stuff happens. I'm like, I didn't feel nothing. And I was disappointed. I was like, dang it. Like I wanted it to be, like I wanted to be validated in some way. And I wasn't. But, take it for what it's worth. But the one that on Netflix was the house Haunted Hill. Is that what it was?
The
Hill House, the series.
Hill House. Yes, Hill House.
Yeah.
Hill House? The
yeah.
Haunting at Hill House.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that was done by Stephen King's son.
Holy gosh. Wow.
It's my favorite series.
You know what
I was scared every episode, but I liked the way they pulled in characters from my childhood, like Elliot is in it.
Yep.
And they told a story within it being really scary. So there was a whole like different planes of existence happening. It was really I thought it was well made, and it was
now and they put them together. What's happening, what happened then, and how they affect each other.
Yeah. It was just, and it was a fun watch. Like there were lots of times when I jumped completely out of my skin.
And I think that's why we like Dr. Sleep, because it was the same person that directed it.
Probably. And I enjoyed Rose the Hat. Like I enjoyed
Dr. Sleep is good though. I like the little girl character. I like when people are not always scared and they're, taking on things. But there's another point you were making, Nicole, that I agree with. And I think when we're talking about paranormal activity, and this goes back to like what Amy and I do, and I know as a writer, when you're building your world, you kind of have to answer all the questions. Even if you don't answer them in the story, you need to know the answers as a writer. Yeah. And I think the problem when I watch Ghost Hunters, when I watch any of these paranormal investigators, many times they don't understand what's going on. And when you're dealing with the paranormal, you may not know what's going on. But when you're writing a story, you need to know what's going on. You can't just have, why did that happen? Something out of the blue. What's the motive of the ghost? You're going to confuse the audience. And I think that's what paranormal activity, and what was the other one where once they avoided death,
Final Destination.
I think, there's a mystery to the Grim Reaper and how death comes to us. But when we're telling a story, you can't have too much mystery. You got to be able to direct your audience somewhere, or else you'll confuse everybody. Life can confuse us. That's fine. But stories can't. People don't go to the movies and read a book to be confused. They want to know what's going on.
Yeah. And if you're not clear when you're writing it, that's going to come through.
Yep.
You need to have it clear in your head. Like you said, even if you don't use it all, I storyboard, I do character sheets. I make sure everything is clear with me before I start.
Timelines?
Yes, timelines, because I have tried to do without timelines before, and it was a disaster. I had to read my own stuff to figure out what I was doing. But, if you're not clear about your story, your audience isn't going to be clear either.
The other thing, like I learned with timelines, is a poet told me once that all stories have no beginning and really have no end. You're just telling a window in a bigger story. So you have to frame it. And timelines became useful for me because it gave me a time frame that I had to explain everything in. Like when you're dealing with the paranormal, you may find something out that happened in 2020 that relates to something before you started telling people the story. It goes back to the 1900s. Now you got to go back and you got to explain all that. That's confusing. Life. But a story can't be, especially if you're going to tell a story in a different order, right? Sometimes you want to tell a story people tell a story from a middle scene, like right before they slay the dragon. If you're going to tell a story out of order, you better have a timeline.
Yeah.
Playing with the timeline.
I just watched 1922 yesterday. I don't know if you guys see that one. And it starts out with him sitting down, writing out his confession. And then he narrates the story and goes back through it. And I really enjoyed it because I thought it was really well done the way the way they had him narrating everything he did step by step and all the consequences of everything he did. But without a timeline, that would have been a disaster.
Like Interview with a Vampire.
Mhm.
You have a timeline for that, because otherwise we're going through history, and sometimes you want to figure out what your story is going to be. Is it going to be a mystery? Is it going to be a time told differently? Or is it just going to be action? Because if you try to give everything in one story, you're going to confuse people too. So,
Yeah, you don't want to confuse people.
And I think maybe that's with like The Conjuring. Maybe that's why people enjoy that, because it's telling sections of the story throughout. And maybe that's why we enjoy, Netflix, Haunting of Hill House too, because it's telling the story within, a certain period of time. Like I like being scared, but I like to know why.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think one of the scariest movies I saw that was paranormal was The Haunting in Connecticut. And the only reason I thought it was scary is because I actually saw the documentary that they did on a haunting. So like that was one of the first shows on I think it was on Sci-Fi at that point, or whatever it was on. And so A Haunting like went and talked to the people that were involved and kind of retold the story. And so when I saw the actual like movie, I thought it was scary because you actually kind of saw the all of the recreations kind of play out as a full story.
Yeah.
But that story in of itself was scary because the more you get into paranormal, you start thinking about all of the things that have to do with death and how close you are when you're, sick, like, when you have cancer, or how close you are to that veil and how close those things are to you, and you can see them and hear them and be in, what word? Words. Interrupted by them. Like you can be swayed to do certain things and to be certain things. And, I think that was probably one of the scarier moments for me was like, I liked that show because it showed, it talked to the people and it recreated what happened. And it kind of gave you a reason for why it was happening. Because they went back and said, well, there's, this is what happened in the house before it happened. So it wasn't just ghost hunters running around shrieking at things that didn't exist.
Oh my God, did you hear that? I mean, that's
No,
like
I didn't.
that's like every ghost hunting show. What was that? Did you see that?
Well, and who's gonna do it too. Like who's gonna be that person. Like in Ghost Adventures, it's Aaron. Aaron will always scream for no reason, and I'm like, what the hell are you screaming at, man?
Yeah. And Aaron's always going to be the one that has to go in the basement by himself.
Yeah. And Zach is always the one that sits at Nerve Center and is like, well, you're going to go and be deprived of sensory anything. Why do they get to do it? Although he did go in the demon house, hey.
Yeah. So since we're on the paranormal thing, let's hop into the religious paranormal stuff like Omen and The Exorcist. Jeff, you want to hop into this?
Like I said, I used to be scared of the religious tropes, the devil and hell and curses and sins and stuff like that. But before I started writing, I just got into good and bad and consequences, pain and pleasure, things of that nature. Those are a little bit more universal. But I guess, I don't know. I mean, I think another one that blew the lid open for me was the Da Vinci Codes, where it put out the mystery behind the Bible and Jesus in a way that it's what I used to think about when I talked to my friends and on the street about questioning that. And I think those storylines are cool for me in terms of putting it into a framework where it opens it up whether you believe in Christianity or not, as opposed to it just being, oh my God, Satan is the one that did it, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, I used to say, well, what is Satan, another God? How does he have, and then I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody that's Christian, you know what I'm saying? But those are the things that used to run through my head. I used to be like, yo, if I'm down with God, then I'm not worried about, and I do good, right? I shouldn't be worried about somebody else. I got enough people to worry about. I'm not worried about another entity. But I do think, I guess in the overall conversation of horror, that has been a challenge because you could just write it was a demon or a devil, and that was enough for people. Now we have to have the nun, and the nun has to have a background of pain beyond she was possessed by the devil. Like the Exorcist, you just was possessed by the devil. Oh, a demon came from hell, and that was good enough. Right? Readers and audience want more of an explanation than that now. You know what I'm saying? The Damien Omen kid, I remember watching The Boy, and I thought The Boy was going to be something. Nope, The Boy needed more of an explanation than just some demon. It's not good enough anymore. And I think, I'll credit the internet, right? We can Google a lot of things now. The average person, besides for some people who won't just say who they are, the people that, conspiracy, the flat earthers of the world, but for the rest of us, right, we can learn things that we didn't know before, and we can question things. So as a writer, I can't just use, the devil as my definition or my explanation for what is the bad thing in the story. They want to know, okay, the devil, what did he do? What did the devil do? Remember how we used to be scared of Darth Vader? Oh, he's Darth Vader. And then people said, well, who has he killed? How bad is Darth Vader? You know what I'm saying? People were like, come on. And then they said, all right, Rogue One, we got to show him going crazy with the lightsaber and just being brutal with it and savage. That's how it is nowadays. You got to give them more than just hell. Give me more.
Amy, you want to hop in on that?
I think, like what he was saying, we've kind of become desensitized to some of this. So what once was really scary now has to be really amped up because it's not scary anymore. Like you said, it's just, oh, it's the devil, big deal. Where before, 30, 40 years ago, if you just said that, people are, they're like, oh, no. Don't go down that road. So, I don't particularly like the movies that have like the demons and being possessed and that kind of stuff. And it's mostly just because of my religious background. I don't want to mess with any of that. I've told my kids, you can watch the scary movies or whatever. Don't bring a Ouija board in the house. Okay, let's just not play with that. You can do just about anything else. Don't play with that. There are just things that bother me personally, so I don't go there. But then there are other things that I would have thought would have scared me that over the years I've watched these, possessed and horror and think, it's not really that scary. So maybe my perspective is evolving a little bit. But yeah, it's definitely, I don't know. I think it all just boils down to how people feel about that particular subject and whether it scares them or not.
Would you say then that like religious horror films are like just not easy to do? Or
I think with anything though, like everything in religion is really very up to interpretation. And I hate to say this because, like I know that there are just as many people that are religious as there aren't, but I think that every time you say that somebody told the story, how many times does the story get told before it becomes greater than it was? Like, like it gets embellished over and over again. And so like as time goes on, I think you have to have some of the very clear, like, like the things that we all expect. But I think that you're going to have to start getting a little smarter than just, just what we can grasp. Like, I think that's why the Da Vinci Code was so important. And that's why a lot of these other movies that kind of unveil, like, unfold out into like these excessive like stories become important to us, because we know that it's just not black and white. There's shades of gray. And I think like movies like The Exorcist, which I will honestly say I don't think I've ever seen the entirety of the movie. Like, there's just there's a point at which, children should be the purest form, and why is she the one that's possessed? Like, I don't understand, like, in all of my teachings, that shouldn't be possible. Like, in everything every part of that shouldn't be possible. And then for things like that to happen to her as a child, like, I find it difficult to watch. So I think that every time we talk about religion, we got to put something in there that makes it that much more, like, we are desensitized. But I think we're smarter too. Like, we can't just say God is here and the devil's here and this is what it is and we should be scared of him. And, we don't do that anymore. There are so many of us that are looking for something else, is this really right?
Yeah.
So we're looking for, is this really a thing? So, if a near-death experience puts me that much closer to where I'm going to be in the next realm, then I want to know more about that. And there's only so much that science can tell me. There's only so much that the Bible can tell me. There's only so much that any other book can tell me, because it's been told to someone from another person's perspective. So I think we got to be more careful about that. And that's why we're afraid, that's why the things that are scariest for us are the things that we don't understand. Like, I don't understand possession, so I don't want to watch a movie about it. But I'm also interested, like, in certain things. Like, I am interested in the tropes in witchcraft, and I am interested in the tropes in voodoo, and I'm interested in those other things that I don't know anything about, and that's probably what makes them scary.
All right, here you go. I'm going to piggyback on what you said, Nicole. And
Oh wow! I just got a thing here. Regis Philbin passed away.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
we just got a little pop-up on our thing.
Wow, I grew up with Regis.
He was 88. Wow. Dang.
Was it coronavirus?
I'm not reading it right now. It just says Regis had
It
passed.
just was a Microsoft Edge pop-up thing.
Oh, okay. We will find out more, especially with Kelly Ripa coming on Monday. We'll talk more about that. But what I was saying, to piggyback on what you were saying, Nicole, and a little bit of what you said, Amy, I think of it with zombies, for example, right? The Walking Dead, right? I used to just be able to say, it came from hell. Dun, 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 right? Black and white movie. It was good enough. You know what I'm saying? And that was your zombie. And he came back to life. Dun, 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 you know what I'm saying? But now, audience want to know, okay, what caused him to die? Was it a virus? You know what I'm saying? Was it, toxic waste? Was it a drug that he took? What the hell was it? I need to Google this. If I Google it, it's not scary. I think when you talk about entity and some of the unexplainable things, okay, Google gives me answers that are unexplainable. That's scary too. If it's a Google map, then I'm scared. But I'll give you an example with the fear of the devil, right? One of the other movies that my wife likes is Hellboy. We played with the devil. We got the devil's son with shaved off horns, and I don't think that's necessarily scary, but it represents something that is scary. The devil, that's the core of fear. You talked about it, Amy, right? With Ouija boards, right? And in my last two movies, I used the same Ouija board. And since the introduction of Jordan Peele, I've since made it a goal of mine to expand the perspective of what we enjoy in horror films in America. And that is by bringing in the Black perspective or an African American perspective and what scares you, and attempt to use that to scare you and to scare everybody else. And I think it worked the way he did it with Get Out. But I got scared too. So, Amy, like, I made an Egyptian Ouija board, and I was like, all right, I ain't playing with the Ouija board was fine, and I know it didn't exist, and I'm not scared of talking to the dead, but I am scared the other element. I made this movie called The Black Nun, right? And The Black Nun, my hook was Annabelle was a doll. So you know, Jewish people have a Methuselah that attaches to their front door. So I said, what if the Black Nun was a Methuselah character that people in this certain section of Miami put on their doors? So I went down this world building rabbit hole. I said, who is she? Where is he? And I came up with some cool stuff. And I said, all right, Nicole said voodoo. What if I explore that variation? You know, I have friends that's into Santeria. I live in Miami. So I got Haitian students. I got practicing Santeria, and then there's another one that they practice out of Trinidad, and then there's another one that comes out of Africa, right? But there's all similarities. Most of the similarities is there's no universal God, there are deities. These deities are like people and certain types of people. So you have immature deities that like to play around like kids. Then there's other deities that's divas, and you got to cater to them. So I'm learning all of this, and I said, last thing I want to do is make a real deity and piss a real deity off, because I have respect for, like I said, I still believe in spirituality. I still believe in the paranormal. Well, let me just say, I don't even believe in it. I accept it, right? Because I've seen things, I've witnessed things that are real to me that are not capable of being provable, right? I can't prove to you that I talked to my grandmother, right? But I remember how real it was for me and the seed of awareness that it planted in my head. So when it came to writing these things, even this character here, Baba, you know, the African king, you know, I made my own African mask, but the special effects artist was from, I think he was Puerto Rico or Cuba or mixed. He was aware of Santeria, and he was like, well, I want to make it like a real Santeria deity. And I was like, you're absolutely right. I don't want to make it like a voodoo deity either, because I don't want that in my house. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to know it. I want to go straight clown. But I think there are people that are so potentially atheists that have no problem doing these things. And I am not one of those. You never, you know, like, I don't want to be one of those filmmakers that on the set we had hauntings. Mm-hmm. I don't want to be that. You know, because at some point I'm pissing somebody off. And the last thing, I don't want to piss people off in the real world, and I don't want to piss people off in the after real world, whatever that is.
As we're in the future, I'm Googling Jeff Carroll. Jeff Carroll film set haunted. Oh, man.
No, you're not going to see that.
Now, the funny thing is when they talk about, like, you know, anybody who is accepting of all that, so they talk about what you put out, but you can't control what comes in. So like the whole thing about Ouija boards is, oh, you have to believe in that. And I'm like, okay, well, what about the kids that play with the Milton Bradley Ouija board and they don't know where it came from? Like, my uncle is like, well, the spirit board has to be made from wood that was struck by lightning. And I'm like,
and they still sell that, right?
Okay, well, Milton Bradley is making it out of all kinds of paper, paper products that came from trees from God knows where. So how do I know which one's going to work and which one?
We don't know the real origins of any of that.
I don't know where that came from. It is.
Remember, I made that joke. We were at Spirit Halloween last year, and they had it on the shelf.
He's like, "Oh, we should buy." I said, "Hell no, we're not. I have it in my house." So it becomes this whole thing. Like, I can put out whatever I want to put out, but I cannot control what comes back in. And that whole thing about control, I think, is another thing in horror movies, is like, who has the control. So you see it turn when somebody else has the control. So when the killer has the control, it's one way. But when it turns to either being the final girl or the heroine or the hero, you find that when it turns to who has the control, the storytelling changes a little bit. And I think that when we talk about paranormal, it's like, who really has the control? Like, we can't see it, so we don't have any control.
Yeah.
And if you are, I don't want to say lucky, unlucky, whatever, to see it, if it's positive, you're fueled with positivity. But if it's negative, that it scares you more. Like, I have experiences where it was very positive and it made me feel good. And I was happy to see them and hear from them and kind of had an essence of that person that I missed. And then there are times when it was terrifying and I didn't know who I was messing with. And, like, what is scary is that you don't have control over it. Like, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. And I don't know what they could do to me at the end of it. Like, my dad isn't going to come in and try to kill me, but at least I hope he won't. But whatever was in the corner of my room that shook my bed, I don't know what its intentions were. So, like,
is that all it's going to do? Is it just going to shake your bed, or is there more?
Or is it going to try to do something else?
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't have control. So I think a lot of our human condition stuff is like what scares us and what we have control over. Like, the fear of the dark is very real because it's something that we've feared forever. It's like, when we have fire, we can only see until the fire, we only can see what the light of the fire illuminates. And everything outside of that is what's scary. Yeah. So, like, and it is what could kill us. It's like, because we don't know. We don't know what's out there. It's like the veil between what's real and fantasy and the veil between, worlds. It's kind of like, what can come in and what do I have control over? And, you can yell at it and you can try to ward it off or whatever, and you just piss it off and make it worse. Like we've seen in a lot of stories where they've been, they burn their sage and they say their prayers and it riles everything up worse than it was when it wasn't a thing. So control is the big thing for horror, I think.
Yeah. This has been a fun episode talking about horror. Just before we end the show here, I'll start with you, Jeff.
Okay.
If someone had never seen any horror movie at all, what horror movie would you recommend?
You are asking that question in 2 seconds. I got to come up with an answer. I'm going to say, let me give you one of the movies that I would recommend, because to come up with the movie, I'm probably going to get it all wrong. And I don't know yet. Let me think. Sheesh. All right. So somebody that never been to this country that represents like American horror, probably the best stuff to say, okay, this movie should scare you. Gosh. I don't know. I Poltergeist is like one of my go-to movies because it's kind of easy, and I like those easy transitions from everyday person not really thinking about it to all of a sudden, what the hell is going on? Everything's gone crazy. Because I think is a big factor in scaring people. So I think that really represents it very well. I'm comfortable with giving that answer right now. I could say something else later time. Right now, I mean, I love zombie. I love zombie movies, and that zombie storyline is really cool. But I'm going to go with Poltergeist because there was a lesson to be learned, and I like lessons to be learned in movies, and I think it takes the non-believers and makes them believe So,
Amy,
and,
same
yeah.
question to you.
Are we trying to traumatize this person? Just
Like they want to watch horror and they've just never seen.
well, you know, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking Poltergeist.
Okay.
Because it's just so universal. I also think alongside that, I would probably recommend, like, if they wanted to see a series, like The Haunting of Hill House, because I think it's so well done, and there's so many twists in the plot, like the Broke Neck Girl. Oh my gosh, that twist blew my mind. So yeah, for Poltergeist or Haunting of Hill House.
Those are some great choices.
Yeah.
I mean, Poltergeist is on the list of one of the movies that I would recommend to people. Also, I would recommend the original Nightmare on Elm Street, especially if they want to get into slasher horror.
Yeah, this type of horror is important too.
Right.
So many different kinds.
Yeah.
I think Nightmare on Elm Street is probably the scarier, most useful of the scary ones, without being so cheesy that you like, oh man, So yeah, I was scared of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I think mental illness gets a bad rap, in there. So I kind of wouldn't want it to. Child abuse and mental illness is like a bad combination. So that's what I think Leatherface kind of represents as a child advocate. Like, I would say that. And there's other movies like Amityville Horror people love so much, but I think ghosts get a bad rap in Amityville Horror. Like these good people. So like in Poltergeist, I think the evil is spread. And I don't think the ghosts are technically bad. They just want to communicate something back to life.
Mm-hmm.
And the bad person was the one who didn't tell them that they were building a house on top of
burial ground.
So to me, I can see that and I don't feel that bad. Like, I do believe ghosts get a bad rep. And that's my problem with Jaws. That's why I can't recommend Jaws, because I think great white sharks get a bad rap, because I don't think the shark was the bad guy. I think them overfishing in the areas where the great white hunts is the real bad guy. Because
we know the mayor was the bad guy of that.
It's stupid.
They don't show you that the overfishing is what caused the shark to come to shore. Sure, the mayor let them go back in the water, and it was like, sure, we got to make sure people go back to school, you know what I'm saying, amidst the coronavirus, irrelevant, right? But
oh my God.
the shark wasn't just by happenstance, you know what I'm saying? Great whites are all over the world, and every beach doesn't have that level of terror, So I like sharks, you know what I'm saying? I like crocodiles, I like all of these. But again, if you don't respect the environment, you're not going to have, if you respect it, you're not going to have these sort of problems.
Yeah.
So that's why I choose Poltergeist.
And you know what? You could have given any answer, and probably it was not going to be wrong, because
I don't think any answer would be wrong. Like, right. For me, there's two that I would recommend, and I think it's the first one is just because I love the movie so much. It's called It Follows, and that's because it's about life and life happening, but it's about what we pass on. So it's like, if I transfer it to you, then it's not my problem anymore. It's like kind of like that great passing of the buck, which is kind of like, an evil of itself. It's like, what do I do for myself to get rid of this?
Like, did you see the anime story, the Japanese story, Death Note?
But I heard about it.
Yeah, I think that's similar to that.
Mm-hmm. And then the second one, if you want to talk about like the tropes in horror movies, is Scream. Because I know in a way it's kind of making fun of all of that, but there's a lot of like, every horror movie follows a kind of a, well, at least the slasher flicks do. They follow a formula.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can almost know by heart what's going to happen based on it. And the fact that these are all, kids that don't believe, oh yeah, I'll be right back. And, he ends up being one of the killers.
And we know in a horror movie, never say, I'll be right back.
Never say, I'll be right back, because you won't.
Figure out what the noise is.
Okay, let me throw this other one to you, right? What if I would have said Alien?
That original Alien, yes.
Alien's a good one, yeah.
Nobody hears you scream in space.
You know what other one scared me, though, was, what was the one with Mila Jovovich?
The Alien one?
The Alien one with Mila Jovovich.
Oh, Fourth Kind?
Fourth Kind. That movie is...
Okay, here's another one. What about, because this is now I'm thinking, right? What about Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Oh, is that
like
the original or the one with Donald Sutherland?
I'm down with all of them, right? They all work for me. Even the other one, the new version of it with James Bond. What's his name?
Daniel Craig.
Yeah, even the Daniel Craig one works for me. That was even scary. Or something like The Thing. And I still also think that aliens get a bad rap. But I'm kind of cool with them because I don't know, they're taking too long to get here. So if they are aliens, they need to come here and defend their reputation.
I think they've looked at our planet. Nah, it ain't worth it.
I think we have enough problems, and let's not add zombies or aliens to what we've got going on already.
I kind of think that Earth is TMZ for aliens.
So, Jeff, it's a bad reality TV show.
Yeah. Jeff, where can people find you online, buddy? And what's the newest project you got going on?
Well, right now I'm a Kickstarter addict. So every 2 or 3 months I'm doing a new Kickstarter. So you can find me on Kickstarter getting these comic books out. That's where I need the most help. I have the movie The Death Pledge, which is out now. And unfortunately, the coronavirus, my other movies have been pushed back to 2020. 21. Hopefully, we'll be back to theaters and other things by then, and we'll be able to enjoy streaming the way it used to be for movies that couldn't make the theater. Now we got movies that aren't able to have to get out, So streaming is real good movies now. And then that's it. And then my horror books are all on Amazon, and my horror comics are on Indie Planet.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely post those links after the show. Now, Amy, what about you? You got something in the works, and where can people find you?
I'm currently working on my first psychological thriller, which is titled Neurosis. We're going to be doing a big cover reveal and a release date launch pretty soon. You can find all that information on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/author Amy Hale. We'll also be announcing information on Instagram, Twitter, which is also at author Amy Hale, and then my website, authoramyhale.com. I try to keep that updated as much as possible as well. And then, of course, all of my books you can find Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, the various, retailers.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it was a fun topic. I love horror, and I always love bringing special guests like yourselves on. And so this week comes to an end, and then we start a new month.
Yay, August.
Yay, August.
I know.
So with Reels and Mules, you can find us here on Facebook, on YouTube at the Hanging With Web Show TV, and we're on Spotify and Apple Music or Apple Podcasts. I forgot they are separate now. You can find us Google Podcasts, all those great places.
I don't know.
And I believe next week, August 1st, is Summer Blockbusters will be our next episode. So that should be fun.
Yay.
Until next week, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.